What was the pettiest reason you refused to date someone? I had a woman I was flirting with tell me she couldn't date me because I hadn't gotten that first marriage out of the way. I wasn't sure I understood her correctly, but she explained, because I was never married, she didn't want to be my first divorce. Seemed cynical, but I also felt I dodged a bad situation right up front. He wore a Bluetooth piece in his ear. The constant blue light blinking from the side of his head was too much for me. Another guy would text name instead of damn. It wasn't a typo either, it was every time. I had to explain everything to a girl. Everything. I still don't know if she was exceptional stupid or tried to keep the conversation going and was just really bad at it. Do you remember the guy who acted like he didn't know what a potato was? Texting with her was exactly like that. Everything was going great. Thought she was an amazing girl and we'd been seeing each other for 2 months. Go to her house for the first time and it was a little messy, but nothing to write home about. Then I go to the bathroom and put up the toilet seat. I don't think she'd ever cleaned the bottom of the toilet seat given how disgusting it was. From then on, the only thing I could think about when talking or being with her was that disgusting toilet seat. Every time I touched her, I would smell of egg, like holding hands, egg, hug her, my shirt would smell of egg. Strangest bit was, she didn't smell like that whatsoever. Also, when I broke it off, the egg smelling stopped, so I DK. After our first date he called me and asked me what I was up to. I replied cleaning my house. He says, "Oh, you like cleaning? I have a house cleaner who comes every other day. But if we got married we could get rid of her and just have you clean." Sometimes they make it easy for you to decide if there should be a date number 2. She once wanted a burger without chips. I wanted one with chips. She ate all of my chips. Her reason was that because I wasn't eating my chips because I didn't want them. I asked her if I didn't want them, why did I order them? His laugh. It was the weirdest sounding laugh I've ever heard. The first time I heard it I was like, nope, can't deal with that for the rest of my life. Edit. Since many of you want to know what it sounded like, here's my best description. It's like he was trying to inhale and laugh at the same time. Very breathy, like gasping except worse. She was super hot, but she smelled. I don't know if she didn't shower or use deodorant, but she just smelled funky. I couldn't do it. My best girlfriend at the time was like, just tell her. How do you tell a girl you've known for a few weeks that she smells bad? ? So I just stopped talking to her. Brilliant. He wouldn't stop calling me endearments like love and sweetheart. This was via WhatsApp before we had met in person. And even after I told him I didn't like it and to please stop, did not get to first date. He was wearing a hideous brown fake leather jacket. It was so old that the leather had started to flake off and parts were just now canvas. He kept stopping to look at himself in windows and saying, "Oh God, I look so hot today, I just can't believe how hot I look," smoothing down his manky jacket, side-eyeing me, expecting me to agree with him. I left so he could be alone with his jacket. Was at her place and said we'd order pizza. She literally went to the kitchen and came back saying she put the order in. Didn't ask what toppings I wanted, any sides, nothing. Edit. For those asking, I don't remember the exact pizza, but it was thin crust and BBQ base, 2 things I hate, but that's not really the point. She could have guessed my preference and I'd still be put off by the weirdness of it. Also, no sides is criminal. Dated a friend of a friend. She was easily a 10/10ths. She jumped me and made out with me. Her version of kissing was sucking my lips until they were swollen red within a minute. I might be the only man alive who told her it's getting late. You should go home. He couldn't drive a stick shift. He bought the small pickup, and paid less for it because it was a stick, but he never bothered to actually learn how to drive a manual transmission vehicle. He picked me up for a date and we lurched the whole way there and back. I thought I was going to throw up, and it wasn't like he had bought the truck a day or two before. He'd had it for months. I just couldn't date a guy that dumb. Most recently, they kept talking about going out to bars and drinking all the time. We had some common interests and things initially seemed promising, but then it seemed like they just kept talking about how much they liked alcohol, and then they would text at weird times because they'd been out all night, etc. He would call me his beautiful angel. He really didn't know how to spell angel, so for 5 months I put up with being an angel. Also dated a guy who wanted to put the single wide trailer on his parents' front lawn and thought I was unreasonable for not wanting to move in with him once he did so. He wore a horrible pink shirt with palm leaves on it. It looked like woven vomit. Would have been okay with that, but he thought it's the shit because it was a designer shirt. He bought it second-hand. He thought I'd be falling in love because it's a designer shirt and he can afford it. The attitude and his ego made me wave goodbye after 5 minutes of the date. We didn't even leave the train station. His entire back was covered in acne. I don't mean small patches, or even a trouble spot. I mean from top to bottom, full cysts and bubbling whiteheads everywhere, and realized that same day that the shirt he had taken off actually had pus stains from infected acne that had popped or burst while he wore the shirt. I dropped him same day, and he caught on to why. He said he didn't need to see a doctor, and I disagreed. I still feel bad about it, but it was honestly a massive turnoff. And how many more arguments could we get onto in the years to come if you refuse to seek medical help for treatment for other conditions? No thanks. First date with the guy. Went to a nice restaurant for dinner where he couldn't maintain conversation. Trying to get responses from him was like pulling teeth without Novocaine. That was bad enough until he stopped talking altogether and started texting me from across the table. On our first date, which he initiated, it was also our last date. Edit, yes, I'm aware he was probably on the autism spectrum, as am I. First date, he told me how he worked in real estate, then proceeded to tell me about how he moves every 1-2 years, because he's in real estate and finds a deal apparently. Oh, and usually would move with whatever current girlfriend he was with. Regardless of his awesome real estate knowledge, the girl would always just be amazed at the great house he would find and want to move in. Number. I am 5'6". I went on a date with a guy whose dating profile said he was 5'10". I was taller than him, without heels, which he pointed out to me. He went on a rant about how I must have lied about my height on my dating profile, because he was definitely 5'10". So I couldn't be 5'6" and be taller than him. I've got news for you, dude. Went back to a girl's place, and it was absolutely covered in Penn State merch. I'm talking posters, blankets, jackets, candles, and a bunch of stuffed Nittany lions. I made up some excuse and bailed immediately. She was almost 30 and lived like a freshman with zero taste. I don't trust individuals with too much school spirit, and those who take holidays way too seriously. There was a guy I liked and we were flirting a lot, and then he asked my roommate out on a date. They went out and she said he spent the whole time asking about me. So we asked his friend about it, and apparently he had what he thought was a brilliant plan to go out with my roommate so I would become jealous and want to go out with him. Except I had been more than willing to date him if he had asked me instead of my roommate. He called me a week after the date with my roommate trying to spin some story about how going out with her showed him how much he liked me, asked if I wanted to go out, and I told him I don't go on dates with guys who have dated my friends. her self-consciousness about her own height. "I'm 6 feet tall." She said she was 5'11", but honestly she appeared exactly my height. She seemed to take great pains to appear shorter. Slouching, leaning against things, even bending her knees while standing next to me. I do not believe I demonstrated any indication that her height was a put-off for me. It wasn't. Maybe she assumed it was. A mutual friend assured me my height wasn't a problem for her, so I don't know what was going on there. She was well known for dating those with disabilities, particularly mental ones. It was her way of trying to fix them and showing what a loving and caring person she was. Then she asked me, and I was both flattered and also insulted beyond belief. Like, wow, calm down, I have a speech impairment, not a mental one. I know people think those two things are one and the same, but no. It's a physical thing, not a mental handicap. My best friend at the time asked me out, but I didn't want to date because she wasn't liked by most of my friends in high school. It's really sad because I didn't want to ruin my reputation around the school by dating my best friend, which could have ended up going somewhere, but now that's never gonna happen. This was almost 5 years ago and we're still pretty close. Went on a first date to the movies. This fucking guy ... Instead of picking up his drink and lifting the straw to his mouth, he would put his hands on his knees, keeping his eyes on the screen, and lean over to the drink and hunt for the straw with his face and his mouth contorted sideways trying to land on the straw. Weirdest shit ever. I took a girl on a date one night. While in the restaurant, I think a crazy stalker ex of hers cut my brake lines on my truck. I managed to have driven her home before I realized what was wrong. I used vice grip pliers and extra brake fluid to get over my way home from the date. Because of her crazy ex, I never went back for another date. Met a girl that I thought was really cute and who was obviously into me. Like, she would laugh a little too much at my jokes that weren't even funny. Two things killed it for me. She posted on social media way too damn much for my liking. She adopted a kitten that turned out to be sick a few days later, and she wanted to bring the kitten back to the shelter because of it. That's not the kind of person I want to be with if they're going to be that heartless. Well, I wasn't the one being petty. This actually happened to me. The girl I wanted to date, we'll call her Sarah, said that she couldn't date me because her parents wouldn't approve of it because I was Hispanic, which really threw me for a loop because her parents loved me. I later found out from Sarah's sister that she actually didn't want to date me because of my weight. I moved on, lost a ton of weight, and started dating my now wife. Sarah tried her best to get me to break up with my GF, but I wouldn't budge. Now I'm happily married and Sarah had to get gastric bypass because of her weight. Oh, how the turntables. Edit. Thank you to whoever gave my first award. On our way to see a movie for our first date, he accidentally ran over a cat. Edit. My first award. Thank you. I didn't expect this to blow up, so I'll add a little bit more. Running over the cat was completely accidental on his part, although I did spot the cat before he did and said look out. He didn't really seem that upset about it, but it completely ruined the night for me. I'm the kind of person that will go out of my way to help animals, even like ... a pigeon, so if the same level of compassion isn't there, it could never get to work. Their hands, and I don't just mean good hygiene. I genuinely can't date someone if I don't like their hands. I went on this date with a guy who I thought was pretty attractive. He was genuinely nice. We had the same sense of humor, the conversation felt natural, and then I paid attention to his hands, and I can't tell you what it is, but something about them seemed so off that I wanted to end the date right then and there. I was painfully aware of them when he held me to kiss me before I got on my train after our date. I felt so bad, but I couldn't do it anymore. She had never heard of an orc. I thought they were as well known as elves, fairies, dragons, etc., but I asked some people and, believe it or not, Not everyone knows what an orc is. Bizarre. Oh, and she asked me why monkeys still existed if we evolved from them. She wasn't religious at all, just a bit ignorant. She was gorgeous, loved science, completely brilliant. She had an amazing body, very pretty and just a truly good person. And she was also the starting shortstop for the D1 softball team at the college I attended, which was hilarious in its own right because I didn't know anything about sports really. She appreciated my taste in indie music and let me play music for her. I have no idea what she saw in that guy back then. I was pretty much a drunk. She had man hands, calloused big hands that were very strong and masculine. I tried to ignore it. I dated her for a few months and then kind of fell off the map like a jerk. I don't really like who I used to be back in college. So vapid and irreverent for others' feelings. It ended up for the best, because the next guy she started dating is the man she married, and that makes me really happy. That guy is going to get great hand jobs for the rest of his life. He tried way too hard. Let me explain. He had this mentality that all women wanted was money and lavish dates. I'm pretty laid back. Money spent isn't a big deal. Quality time and getting to know someone is. Date 1 was a super fancy restaurant, which was a fun experience, sure. But then suddenly it was love and gift bombing. Nope. Pettiest reason I was given someone wouldn't date me? I'm too short and too young looking. I'm 5 feet tall. At the time I was 21 and did look very young, and dude wasn't much older than me, but did have the bearded lumberjack look to him. I was pretty disappointed at the time, but I get it. He'd have looked like a creep with me on his arm. I wouldn't go out on a date with someone because his last name rhymed with my first name. I couldn't deal with the off chance he would fall in love with me and we would end up married, causing me to introduce myself with a sing-song name. I was 14. It was the early 80s. Things were different with names and marriage. Plus I thought you ended up married to the boy that took you to the 8th grade prom because I was a hopeless romantic. Was bragging about being first-gen college, and then laughing about his dad and uncles asking him about the benefits at his job. It isn't about the benefits, I said. Chuckle chuckle, they just don't get it. What a prick. My dad's a fireman and most of us worked our way through college by a combination of scholarship and or taking the 10-year route ... and I'd never laugh at him for not understanding white-collar work. Prick. I had been in the classroom with her when she had a massive panic attack. I was 16 and it scared me to see a good friend like that, and I wasn't sure I could handle it if she had one while we were alone together. So when she asked me out I said no and gave some pitiful explanation. Funny thing is, I learned more about them over the next year and she was amazing, so I asked her out. Later on, she said no with basically the same pitiful explanation, so I guess what goes around comes around. Bad spelling really puts me off, and one guy just kept looking at me on our first date like he was already picturing us getting married and building a house together. Another guy was being protective and caring to a point that made me feel like he thought of me as some precious, fragile, incapable damsel. Fuck that. I'm fit AF and very capable. If not, I will ask for help. I was in 8th grade. But he cut his hair into a buzz cut. He had long skater boy hair and we were weak into the relationship, and I had the biggest crush on him since the first day of school. After the weekend goes by, he comes and hugs me, surprising me with the buzz cut. I was just so shocked that I panicked and dumped him. I hate buzz cuts. I feel so bad. Well, not that bad obviously, but I once told a guy I didn't like him in a romantic way because he was 1 year younger than me, and then in high school I refused to go out with one of my friends because he was shorter than me. We were nowhere near dating, but once a guy from a dating app called me fat because I had a treat for lunch instead of an actual meal. He continued to double down on it, said I should exercise now, etc. before claiming it was a joke and that it's how he jokes around with his friends. This was maybe a day after we matched and one of our first convos. I stopped talking to him. He called me a bitch and told me to chill before trying to get a second chance. Edit. Honestly, this wasn't petty at all. He was a dick. I just wanted to get this one off my chest. Edit 2. Clarification, I am also not even fat. I'm definitely on the skinny side of average, so I didn't completely take it to heart, but it was clear that he was not a fan of my eating habits.